Hello, everyone. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. Today on our show, we are going to have Dr. Flux. Dr. Flux is from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania in the USA. So let's see what Dr. Flux has to say. Enjoy the interview. Hello.
Hello there.
Hello, Dr. Flux. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for taking the time today for the interview. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So tell me, how's your day going so far?
Good, good. Yeah, I've been journaling all morning, which has been really nice.
Amazing. Something that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I write a lot. I would say, I think in 2023, I wrote about 100,000 words in my journal.
Okay.
It's mainly just a lot of philosophical exploration. I would say t today I've been doing another pass at agency, conceptualizations of free will, the evolution of human social behavior, that kind of stuff.
Amazing. And tell me where you're from, Dr. Flus.
Well, I was born in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Hmm?
I was raised there. I did my undergraduate in the suburbs and in Philly. I lived in New York City for a couple of years where I did graduate work at NYU. I moved back into the Philly suburbs. Then I lived in Boulder, Colorado for 5 years, where I worked on my PhD. Then I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I did my clinical internship. And now I am back in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I've been here for about a year and a half.
Wow. You've been moving around. That's great. So tell me, what was the best part of growing up in Philadelphia, in Philly?
Best part. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I don't really feel like I really got a big taste of Philadelphia until I was an adult, much later on. My father was from Brooklyn. My mom was from Las Vegas. They kind of moved to the suburbs. We lived a pretty suburban life. I think I was pretty sheltered. I'm not really sure that my upbringing was deeply culturally tied to the region. I think it's a lot more aligned with like American suburban life in the Northeast more broadly. Um, so I mean, from that perspective, I think it was, it was low key. I don't know. It wasn't very unpredictable. I think that facilitated a certain kind of childhood, which worked in my favor in some ways and didn't in others.
Uh-huh. And do you have siblings as well?
No, it's just me. I'm an only child.
Wow, amazing. So tell me a little bit about your career. What do you do for work?
Oh man, that's a question. What do I do for work? I think I take a bit of a different stance than most people. I mean, it probably functionally ends up being the same thing, but I don't really divide my life between like work and play. I just kind of think about how I exist. And so I try to craft an existence that allows me to be the most joyful and enjoy myself and live in the most alignment with my values. So like my life involves a lot of different activities, but I'm not exactly sure how you would divide it into what I do for work and what I don't. Some of them get paid, some of them don't. I guess we could do that division. Um, but in terms of training, I'm a scientist, right? So my undergraduate degree was in biotech. I worked in the biotech field for a bit. I went into a PhD program in neuroscience at NYU, where I studied the primate visual system. I ended up leaving that program with a master's. Took some time off, worked at the mall, decided to go back and get a double PhD in neuroscience and clinical psychology, where I was trained as a therapist as well as a research scientist. My field is in a psychoneuroimmunology, so that's specifically looking at how the immune system and the brain interact. And particularly, I looked at novel mental health therapeutics. So I worked with a variety of different ways to intervene with mental health. After I finished my clinical internship, I realized that I kind of didn't want to go in the direct clinical direction. It was just very challenging and disruptive, I think, for my own mental health. So I've explored a lot of other directions, and then in parallel to all that, I have, a artistic career and a lot of other things that I do. When I lived in New York, I was a makeup artist and a body painter. I was a performer. I was a burlesque performer. I have since, kind of segued into graphic design, science illustration, and communication. So I do a lot of public speaking. I am an illustrator, so I illustrate. Some of the consulting work I do is for science communication purposes. Um, and yeah, so I also really enjoy the service industry. I have a job at a restaurant right now where I work as a bartender and as a server as well. So I think my life right now is kind of a constellation of a variety of different activities that I enjoy to different degrees, some of which pay me and some of which do not. So I am currently writing a paper with a research group based out of Ottawa in Canada, at Carleton University. We're working on a paper about gender equity and social psychology, and that doesn't pay me any money. I do some consulting research with my former graduate lab, which sometimes pays. I'm working on a book right now, which about the microbiome with a colleague, which will hopefully eventually pay. Though there is no money from that. I currently work at a restaurant as a bartender and as a server, which does pay some money that kind of covers my health insurance. And then I do some consulting work. I consult with a company doing science illustrations and communication for them. In the past, I've done consulting work as a clinical trials consultant and some other things in terms of research. So my life is just kind of all over the place. I also do a lot of personal writing. I wrote a lot of essays that very few people ever see. But my life is kind of constantly a process of perpetual motion to understand myself, the world around me, and try to figure out how to get enough money to survive.
Oh my God. It's so interesting what you just shared now, Dr. Flux, because, you've been exploring different areas, you've been enjoying all of them. And I think it's so fascinating. And that's what life is about. It's about for you
Mhm.
to explore, thinking about, find your path, have some joy, helping people, all the way as well. I think that's amazing. That's great. Wow, my goodness, amazing. That's very interesting for sure. Wow. Right. So before we start our journey within the magic box,
Yes, the
check
magic box.
checking your profile. Of course, it's visible. Your beautiful mustache. It's amazing the way you express and use your hair as well with colors. You play around. So to start the interview, tell me a little bit about. You always have this joy of exploring your mustache, your hair, and changing colors, or it was like just a period of your life that you started doing that?
I think it's followed an interesting progression. I know, like, I was definitely, I was raised in a very kind of closed-minded I was raised in a very religious environment. I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And in some ways that has served me very well. In other ways, it did not serve me well at all, and I've kind of had to grapple with that. And so, I think as a child there were just a lot of boundaries around how I could act and how I couldn't act, and what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And when I left the religion at age 21. Everything just kind of exploded. In terms of I felt like I was this ball of energy that just needed to figure out how to exist. And I think that was a lot of my early 20s when I moved to New York. And it was just like I felt like I was filled with this creative energy that just couldn't even be contained. And everything I did was just kind of it was very chaotic. The first part of my 20s was a very chaotic existence. I think that the second half of my 20s was really trying to step back and then understand, what it is that drives me, and then how to craft a life that really facilitated that. And I think that I kind of came down to three things. One is that in my life, I like to help others. I like to solve complex problems and puzzles, and I like to express myself creatively. So then I tried to build the next stage of my life to really facilitate my ability to do those three things. And so, I think for my late 20s and early 30s, it has really been about maximizing my potential for doing all of those things, making sure that my life is oriented to help others, that I'm constantly solving complex and interesting problems, and that I have a lot of opportunities to express myself creatively. And now I'm kind of on the cusp of moving into the next stage of my life. I tend to think of everything in terms of 7-year cycles, right? So there was age, birth to 7, which was one cycle. There was 7 to 14, which was another cycle. Then there's 14 to 21, and then there was 21 to 28, and then there was, that 28 to 35. Which is kind of what I just described. And moving forward, like 35 to 42, it is a lot more about self and context. I've devoted a lot more of my energy to understanding ethical and moral systems, understanding how to orient my life around those systems, and to think of myself in the context of a larger group. So it's really been interesting to kind of look at the evolution of the ways that I express myself kind of within that kind of format. And that, when I left the Witnesses and started that next 7-year cycle, it was really about kind of a chaotic self-exploration, and then the next stage was really kind of a much more targeted form of self-exploration. And as I move into this next stage of my life, it's more about kind of self in context, like who am I in the context of my life and of everyone else in it, and how can I now think about my behavior in that larger context.
Amazing. Very good. Dr. Flux, are you ready to go on a beautiful journey through your memories in life and share your
I'm so ready.
Amazing. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. So I've got here my best friend. Okay, full of random fun questions. I'm just going to play a song now just for us to relax a bit before the first question, okay?
Sounds good.
Let's do it. Right. So before we start the game, during the join, if it comes up a question that you don't want to talk about for some reason you don't want to answer, always can change, okay?
Sounds good.
First question for you is, tough question for you now. Let's say someone come up to you and say, Dr. Flux, you need to remove forever for your phone, yeah? All the platforms of social media altogether, or YouTube. You cannot keep both. Which one would you choose to keep it and why?
Oh, I mean, I've already basically gotten rid of most social media anyway, so that would be very easy. 2023 was the year that I expunged all social media from my phone, and then I had to bring it back because you can't really exist in our world without social media to a certain extent. And I also realized that like Instagram is just necessary for communication purposes. But yeah, no, I would very happily remove all social media from my phone.
Which platform of social media you are more active?
At this point, probably Instagram would be the most active. I would say prior to 2023, it was probably Facebook. Facebook was really the easiest one to quit and stay off of. I just kind of find Facebook to be a toxic cesspool of unhappiness. So like staying away from that has not been very hard. Instagram has been a bit harder because so many people use it as a core communication platform. And also it's just kind of like people get to know you through Instagram, particularly like working in a social environment like a restaurant or being a bartender. People will ask me for my Instagram and then they go on it kind of looking to learn who I am. And so like not having a presence on Instagram just doesn't really work very well right now. But I've gotten rid of doom scrolling. Like I don't scroll through these platforms anymore. I mainly use them as communication tools and to periodically post things about myself that would let people get to know me.
Amazing. I'm glad you kept Instagram. That's how we connected.
Yes, it is.
Next one. Next question for you is, tell us about your earliest memory in life.
Well, I guess kind of I'm now kind of on the first one. I think a lot of my earliest memories are probably from kindergarten, which would be like age 5-ish. I had this teacher named, she went by Mrs. Karen. I think her last name is Culbertson, but we called her by her first name. And Miss Karen was just very, nurturing and, fun. And I just have a lot of memories of being in that class and doing art projects. Or, I remember we had this like, we had to make what was it? We had like some like recital or something where we all made like you know what? It was to Octopus's Garden. That song Octopus's Garden. Is that by the Beatles? I forget who's singing. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. Whatever it was, that we had that song and we all had to make different like sea animals like fish and stuff. And I think we all like did some type of performance on the playground to that song for like our parents. And I have this memory of doing that.
Did you like school?
I loved school. Oh my gosh. I mean, I loved school so much that after I finished school, I went to school for 12 more years to get a double PhD. And now you couldn't pay me to go back to school, but I will never stop learning, that's for sure.
Beautiful. Next question. Right. So before the next question, tell me, did you always want to be a scientist, or it just somehow was presented to you and you start your career?
I would say this is definitely one of those lifelong things. I remember like in third grade, they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I had two options. One was a scientist, and one was a carpenter. I don't really know where the carpenter one came from, but that scientist theme ended up really, going through the rest of my life. And I think that was, one of the things was like being raised Jehovah's Witness, being a scientist wasn't really on the table. And so I think that like when I left, that was kind of my big, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to be a scientist now. And so that was really the primary motivation with the initial attempt at the PhD.
And what was the hardest part for you of your, become a scientist? When you look back for you, what was the most difficult part? And the other part is, what did you enjoy the most about the journey?
Hmm. I think the hardest part was kind of the disillusion component. I think that we kind of have this idea that science especially is just kind of universally working towards improving the human condition. And I think that when you really get into the nitty-gritty of it, you realize that people are in science for a lot of different reasons. And I think that when I realized that the entire institution of science is not very easily arranged to improve the human condition. It's more just kind of existing to help us to learn things. And then the hope is that learning things will eventually help us. I think that disconnect was really hard for me to know what to do with. And that definitely shifted a lot of the ways that I ended up living my life after that. That realization for me was very challenging, because I think I just kind of assumed that everyone who went into science just like wanted to make the world a better place, and that's definitely not why people become scientists across the board. I'd say the best part of being a scientist, I mean, honestly, it's the aha moments, like when you really get something, like, and when you've had to fight for it, like when you have to work really hard to understand something, and then you finally hit that amazing hypothesis or model, or you finally understand how something works. Like I live for those moments of really making those high level connections between ideas that didn't seem like they connected at first.
Amazing. Okay. Next question for you is, what's the best present have you ever received, and why you consider that?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to like categorize what the best was, but I think that like one of the most meaningful small token gifts that I have received happened when I finished my first year of clinical training. So in graduate school, as when you're training to be a clinical psychologist, your first year is mainly just classes, and then your second year you start working as a clinician for the first time. It's terrifying, right? Because you're now someone's therapist, and it's like you have so much responsibility, and it's a lot. I think a lot of people don't think about the amount of responsibility you really hold when someone comes to you with their problems, and they start you out kind of slow. We worked with initially with like college age people who were dealing with depression and anxiety, which I mean not to minimize those issues, but I think that it often is not as higher stakes as a lot of the work that I did later as a clinician, which was working with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, like higher level like issues and things like that. But I think that after that first year, I worked with my clinical supervisor was an amazing researcher clinician named Dr. Sona Demijan. And when we finished that year, she gave each of us, there were three of us in her clinical rotation, and she gave us all a stone. And the stone was painted with a word that she felt best embodied our personal growth over the year. And mine had the word attune. And she chose that because she felt that I had learned over the course of the year how to attune myself to the needs of my clients. And that was my largest area of growth.
Wow.
I've always really reflected on that as a not just as an end point, but as something to continue to work on, is to continue to work on my attunement with others. So that was a very meaningful gift.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Ready for another question?
Ready?
Let's do it. Next one. Next question for you is, who was your first crush and why?
Oh man, my first crush. Um, Probably, I don't know if this is like borders between like crush and obsession, but I think it's like the first time someone like entered my life from that like weird feeling of like I really like this person and I don't really know what to do with it. Yeah, so it was this was like the first time that someone kind of entered into my awareness as being like, oh wow, I kind of really like this person and I don't know what to do with it. I was a freshman in high school. He was a senior. His name was Ross Widener, and I just like thought he was the coolest. I was involved. So I like put on the morning announcements. I was like the AV, the audiovisual kid in high school, and so there was a group of us that all like put on the morning announcements on video. So we would basically like run a morning news segment, and he was the senior who was in charge of it, and I was the freshman who was coming in, and yeah, I don't know. I kind of became slightly obsessed with him. uh, he was a great guy. I know he later went on to, I think he's a news anchor in Chicago or something. He married a woman and had a kid. And I don't remember when the last time I internet stalked him was. But yeah, I remember that was like my first time where I was like, oh, I really like this person. I don't really know how to file this information. But yeah, that was probably one of my earlier crushes.
Who was your first love and your first kiss that you ever had?
Oh man, those two are not really connected. Uh, love is love is hard for me to explain. I think at this point in my life, I have a very different conceptualization of human relationships that is quite complex. My first kiss was with a random stranger that I met in a bathroom at Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia. That is a long story, but yeah.
Amazing. Very good. Next question. Let's do it. Right. So before the next question, you mentioned about growing up, religion, households, and you also mentioned about your sexuality. You will kind of had some, let's say, um, challenge. Like all of us, we have those challenges. But for you personally, did you have the support of your family, your parents, or it was a bit difficult because of the religion?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely very complicated. I don't think that you can't really say that I was outright rejected for my sexuality. I mean, it's so much more complicated than that, right? Like um it was not viewed positively, that's for sure. I think that like the bigger issue was really when I kind of decided to leave the witnesses like completely. I think within the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, especially now, and it was also like this, I think, to a certain extent, when I was leaving, which was what, over 15, 18 years, 19 years ago, something like that, less than 20 years ago. It's kind of this idea where like you can kind of have gay desires, but you just can't act on them. So that was something that my parents were aware of from the point, like when I was in middle school. I think I talked about that stuff with my parents, and it was always just kind of like this thing I was struggling with. And it wasn't until, I was 21 where I finally was like, hey, I'm actually going to like make a decision to not like try and ignore this stuff anymore. And I'm going to explore what this means to me. And I think that was the biggest rift, and that took a lot of time to figure out how to heal. And I'd say I had a very, very difficult relationship with my parents for a couple of years, as a result of some of that. But I think that we were able to find a way to, continue to have relationships later on. It's been complicated, but positive. My father passed a little over 2 years ago. And I think that, I really felt like when he died, we were in a good place, which was really nice. I mean, obviously, I didn't want him to die. It was very, very hard. But like, when he died, I didn't feel like this was something that was unresolved. He definitely, like, it wasn't like I don't think he really accepted the fact that I, am not a, straight heteronormative individual. But we got to a point where we respected each other. And I think that that's what matters. Because I think you can respect someone that you don't agree with all the time. And I think that was where our relationship got. And that's similar, to how I am with my mother. But yeah, I think we had to find a way to respect each other. And that took quite a few years. That's been my journey with my parents. I mean, the other thing was like when I did leave that religion, though, I mean, I lost everything else, right? I lost all of my friends, my social support. I had to start from scratch. My relationship with my parents wasn't completely severed. It became incredibly difficult for several years. But everything else just kind of disappeared and I had to start all over again. So that was very challenging.
Okay. Next question is, who is your all-time favorite band or your favorite artist and why?
Oh man. All time? I mean, this is hard. It's hard to just like pick one person. I would say like if you look at my listening habits over time and like combine that with my values, like probably Janelle Monáe. Um, I For many reasons. I mean, first off, I love her music, and I have loved her music since the beginning. But second off, I just love what she stands for as an individual and her own personal evolution. I really like how she has progressed in terms of her views of a lot of different things, including her own personal sexuality. I think the way that she has kind of publicly been on that journey has been very admirable, and it really aligns with my own values. I love how she's used her platform as a way to kind of explore multiple levels of creativity that also have a lot of social impacts and identity impacts. I think it's incredibly masterful and really speaks to her talent and her artistry. And I just love her recent album, about pleasure. I think that her decision to really orient towards joy and pleasure in the face of judgment is really admirable and very much aligns with a lot of my current values. So, I think that she'd be up there near the top in terms of favorite artists for me.
Amazing. Dr. Flux, I have 3 questions left. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Let's do it. Okay, next question is, if you could have a superpower, what that would be and why?
This is always a hard one. There's so many superpowers to choose from, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I might just go with boring for this. Like I've always wanted to fly. I mean, right? Like, isn't that like, I feel like that's one of those recurring dreams that so many of us have and I feel like I have it so often where, you'll be in the middle of a dream and then suddenly I'm like, wait, I can fly. And then suddenly you jump off the ground and suddenly you're able to hover. Like, I just think that the idea of freedom, in terms of movement, it's just so attractive. The idea that you could just jump up and suddenly go wherever you wanted, no matter what was happening, I think is something that's very appealing to me. So I think that that's probably the superpower I'd go with.
Right this moment, if you had the superpower of flying, if you could fly anywhere in the world right now, right this moment, where would you go?
I'd probably go back to Paris. It's been a long time since I've been there, and I have been meaning to get back to kind of look at it through new eyes.
Amazing, very good. 2 questions left. Let's do it. Before the next question, you mentioned about mental health, yeah, which is a huge topic, I think, and not ever, like nowadays, I think people, they never talked so much and being so open about it, that never, I think. I remember growing up, I never heard this word before, mental health. And nowadays, for you, what do you think is the biggest cause of mental health issues right now in the world?
Oh man, cause uh biggest that's a you're asking someone who's thought way too much about this. Um, I would say, I think the fact that our environments are so different from the ones that we, evolved to exist in. I think that our separation from, our early environments and the behaviors that were associated with early Homo sapiens has really contributed probably the most dramatically to the fact that we have mental health issues. I mean, when you think about it, like, mental health is just something that the way that we conceive of it is it's very deeply human, right? Like, and it's very much tied to the fact that, our lives are not really in alignment with something. And so when we think about, what was the original alignment, we think about like kind of what our early environment was like. The book that I'm working on right now is very much focused on the microbiome. It's focused on the ecological impact of environmental microbes on wellness and balance. And what we find is that when you take humans out of natural environments, remove our exposure to soil bacteria, remove our exposure to early microbial life that we would have adapted to initially, it dysregulates us on a lot of levels, namely the immune system, the way that the immune system and the brain communicate, and it leads to a lot of imbalance. I think that it's very hard to choose one thing that solely impacts mental health. Partly because this creates a cascade of problems that then, all of them kind of impact each other in a chain reaction of ways. But, if we really want to look at kind of the root of how this all happens, a lot of it has to do with the fact that our physiological bodies are out of alignment with the environments in which we currently find ourselves.
Amazing. Okay. Wow, what an answer. My goodness. Amazing. Next question is, do you have a unique ability that you think no one has or you never met before?
I don't know if no one has this, but I do have an ability to induce altered states of consciousness that I use for usually for like data processing and for shifting the way that my brain works. I was able to work on this, I don't know, about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. It's driven me to the point of insanity once or twice, but I've over the years been able to utilize it in very effective ways to help me to process ideas and come to large scale conclusions using massive data sets.
For example, can you give an example?
Yeah, well, it started, goodness, first time I realized that something was weird was probably in 2010. I started running and I started having these very intense altered states of consciousness that I didn't really understand. I would just get overwhelmed with intense positive emotion. I would suddenly my imagination would expand. And I would have these like weird visions and like, I don't know, it was kind of like my imagination went on hyperdrive. Um, and I spent a lot of time trying to learn how to induce these states because they were very pleasurable and very fun. It's very colorful. It was kind of like a state of synesthesia. And over the course of about 2 years, I developed a system for initiating them using musical cues. So I was able to kind of use specific types of music to induce these states. And I'd say in late 2012, early 2013, I realized that I could use it in a more self-directed manner to increase kind of the cognitive working space of my mind. Basically allow for greater retention of information and to jumpstart my ability to find connections between pieces of information. And so I started using it as a supplementary form of data processing, which I then overused and drove myself kind of off the cliff of insanity and ended up getting hospitalized in a psych ward for a while. And then over the course of the years after that, developed different ways to access this to be able to utilize it in my daily life. And currently, it's a way that I am able to process information. It's how I ended up writing my dissertation. It's basically a way for me to enter into a headspace that kind of expands my mental abilities briefly. I usually can only do it for a couple minutes at a time.
Amazing. Ready for the last question?
Ready.
Let's do it. Next one. So tell me a little bit about your journey as an artist, creative artist.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of I I have always had too much energy inside of me. I don't really know, I think that like there's a lot of ways to view that from a mental health perspective. There's a lot, I think that a lot of times something like that is aligned with bipolar disorder, which is a diagnosis that I have that I've like gone in and out of identifying with. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that like I just go through these intense fluctuating periods of energy surges, and a lot of my life has been figuring out what to do with that. And sometimes it's more destructive, and sometimes it's more productive. And I think my creativity has always come from trying to find a way to channel those surges of energy. And and it happens in a lot of different ways. And sometimes it's just these pure, kind of forces of creative expression that I barely understand or have no control over. And sometimes I'm able to take that force and kind of hitch it to a purpose and utilize it to achieve something that is larger. And so I think my life has constantly been a dance between different forms of expression, some of them being just kind of this very kind of raw, unfiltered creative process. And other times it's been really kind of hitching that creative force to a purpose, usually in terms of communication to some degree.
I see. All right. Last question is, what do you think people need to know about each other before they start a relationship?
What do people need to know about each other? I think that one of the most important things that people need to know before they start a relationship is about themselves. I think we so often kind of jump into relationships looking to find people that will complete us, but we don't actually really conceive of what it will take to complete us. We don't really have a general self-knowledge about what we need or what will actually help us to find joy. And we kind of put that on other people. We ask other people to figure out what we need, and we look to others to kind of fill a need without actually knowing what to ask for. And in my experience, I think that this is one of the things that leads to the most disconnect between people, is that we just kind of assume that other people know what we need without communicating it. And I think that in order to get what we need to understand what we need, and we need to learn how to communicate it to others. And so any relationship really needs to be formed on communication, and that communication needs to be solidly grounded in an understanding of ourselves. I think that that's a place to start.
Amazing. Okay. Not the end yet. Okay, let's play now the word association game. Okay, I'm going to give away some words. Just tell one word that comes to your mind. Quick thinking. Let's start with money.
Power.
Family.
Joy.
Life.
Forever.
Fear.
Attitude.
Love.
Loss.
Sex.
Power.
Religion.
Destruction.
Politics.
More destruction.
Friendship.
Journey.
Desire.
Suffering.
Regret.
Suffering.
Success.
Power.
Wish.
Joy.
Happiness.
Unattainable.
Interesting. One word for Philadelphia.
Curious.
One word for USA.
Fragmented.
Right. And the last one now, scientist, one word.
Oof. Hypothesis.
Can you repeat again?
Hypothesis.
Oh, okay. Right, let's pretend I'm going to meet your best friend for a coffee, and I'm going to ask your best friend, what is the most beautiful thing about Dr. Flux? And what's something that he still needs to work on, to improve on? What your best friend would say?
Oh man. This would be, I don't know, I'm trying to think about this. Which person would be the most likely person to be in this role? Uh, it would probably be Jess right now. Most beautiful thing I think she would say about me would be um, that I am adaptable and that I am constantly trying to grow in ways that allow me to exist uh, better in ways that are more joyful. I think she would probably, what would she say about me needing to grow? Probably say that I need to argue more and stand up for myself more.
All right. Let's play now Dr. Flux in the magic box, and you can ask me a question. But before you ask him the question, tell me the story behind your tattoo that I saw in your arm.
Oh, right. Yeah. So in an effort to understand myself better and to really work with my mental health, I started tracking my life. In 2012, I started just keeping track of like a variety of different variables about my emotions and kind of behavior. And it started out very small. I think by the end of 2013, there was, I don't know, 30, 40 different things. And it kept growing. And that experiment lasted for just about 7 years. And by the time I finished, I was tracking over 125 different items every single day. And it was a major practice in terms of self-knowledge and self-awareness. I used that data set to do a lot of different statistical analyses. I gained a lot of insights into my behaviors, my emotions, and it really helped me to better learn how to optimize my own life to, promote joy and decrease suffering. And so I finished that part of the practice at the end of 2019. And so I got this tattoo to remind myself. Each band is a year, and the width of the band is proportionate to the number of items that I tracked that year. So every time I look down at my arm, it's a reminder of the commitment that I had made to myself to understand my own emotional and physical experience.
Wow, amazing. Okay, you can ask me a question now.
What do you think is the power of questions?
Oh my God. Wow, what a question. Okay, you put me in the spot. I like being in the spots. Never thought about that before. I love that. I love that. What's the power of questions? The first thing that's popping into my head right now, it's about connecting with people. It's about connection. I think when you throw up a question, yeah, as I'm doing here on the show, I don't know what the answer is going to be. I don't know how my guest going to react to that, or how the answer, which direction it will go. Somehow, when I said about connection, that's when the connection starts, because depending the answer here, or any other question when you are, talking to people or asking people around, that's where the connection is going to start, because somehow you're going to put yourself in their shoes. You're going to connect. You're going to picture yourself in maybe the same situation, or maybe a similar situation that you had in the past, or in the future, in the present. And I think that's the power of question. Is about the connection that starts when you my God, I love the question, because I never thought about that before. So yes, I think it's about the connection that's going to happen, as long, depends the answer, depends the reaction, depends in the way the person would answer that, or would take the question. Sometimes not easy to take a question and to answer it. And that's how they start. Even though you don't have an answer, the person is not able to answer it. That's a connection already, because somehow, there is something there in the air that you're going to be related to, something that you're going to get out of it. And I think that's the power of a question. It's about the connection with the answer or the reaction that you're gonna have, after that. I love the question.
I thought you might.
Amazing, my goodness. Over 1,100 interviews, nobody asked me this question yet. Wow, I love that. Amazing. Dr. Flux, did you enjoy the interview?
Oh, I had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being so kind and accepting my invitation, and also to bring all this knowledge to the show. It's amazing. I could be here another hour just learning, talking with you about different topics. But before you go, if you can share a positive message or anything that you live by.
Curiosity. I think that my entire life is driven by being curious. Many of the biggest scientific advancements of our lives have started not with a massive, celebration or with a huge, project, but just with someone going, "Huh, that's funny," and then deciding to continue to go down that line. I think that's literally how penicillin was discovered. It comes from being curious. It comes from asking questions, and it comes from stopping to reflect. And so if I can really encourage anyone to be anything, it's to be curious.
Wow. And can take you in such different directions when you're curious. That's what I believe as well. Thank you so much. Thanks for the interview. It was a pleasure. And you keep in touch, okay? Thanks so much.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Take care.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
So, did you like the show? Don't forget to give a like, share it, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to be part of the show as well, first, subscribe to our channel, and after that, just go to our website, www.williamandthemagicbox.com, and send us a request saying why do you like to be part of the show. And I see you there. Bye bye, see you next time.